Think you know all the iconic 70s bands? Think again. Let's dive into 10 forgotten gems from the 70s that totally deserved more love. Captain Beyond was a supergroup of sorts, featuring members from Deep Purple, Iron Butterfly, and Johnny Winter's band. Known for their mind-blowing blend of progressive rock, hard rock, and psychedelia, their self-titled debut album in 1972 is considered a cult classic. With its seamless transitions between songs and intricate time signatures, it's a journey through cosmic soundscapes that still captivates listeners. Tracks like Dancing Madly Backwards on a Sea of Air showcase their technical brilliance and unique songwriting. So why were they forgotten? Despite their talent, the band's experimental nature didn't appeal to mainstream audiences, and constant lineup changes hurt their momentum. They never received the commercial push needed to reach a wider audience. But here's why Captain Beyond deserves your love. Their music was ahead of its time, complex, ambitious, and completely original. They were a hidden gem of the 70s, delivering progressive rock with the power of a supernova. Poco was one of the pioneering bands of the country rock movement, blending heartfelt lyrics with twangy guitars and harmonies that rivaled the best in the business. Formed by former Buffalo Springfield members Richie Fury and Jim Messina, Poco's albums like Pickin' Up the Pieces and Crazy Eyes became staples for fans of the genre. Their track A Good Feeling to Know
When I need good loving, I always come home to you.
Remains a fan favorite, a bittersweet anthem of longing and hope. Despite their talent, Poco was overshadowed by contemporaries like the Eagles, who took the country rock genre to commercial heights. Poco never quite achieved the same level of fame, even though they laid much of the groundwork. Poco's musicianship and rich harmonies were second to none. They were trailblazers in blending rock and country, creating a sound that still feels fresh and authentic today. Griffin was a progressive rock band like no other. Combining rock, folk, and medieval influences, they created a sound that felt like stepping into a fantastical realm. Their self-titled debut album was packed with Renaissance-inspired instrumentals, but it was Red Queen to Griffin 3 that truly put them on the map. This concept album, inspired by a chess game, showcased their jaw-dropping musicianship and creativity. Tracks like Opening Move are a masterclass in blending classical complexity with rock energy. So why did they fade into obscurity? Griffin's sound was too niche, even for the prog rock scene, and as music trends shifted, their medieval style fell out of favor. They never achieved mainstream success, despite their undeniable talent. Griffin was daringly unique, taking musical risks that few bands would even attempt. Their intricate compositions and medieval flair remain a one-of-a-kind treasure in the world of progressive rock. UFO were pioneers of hard rock and early heavy metal, crafting electrifying tracks like Dr. Doctor, Lights Out, and Rock Bottom. Their albums Lights Out in 1977 and Strangers in the Night in 1979 are considered essential listens for any rock enthusiast. The latter, a live album, is hailed as one of the greatest live recordings of all time, showcasing the raw power of the band's live performances. Despite their undeniable talent and influence, especially on bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica, UFO often flew under the radar. They never quite achieved the mainstream success of their peers, partly due to frequent lineup changes and a lack of major commercial hits in the US. But their awesomeness lies in their ability to blend hard-hitting riffs, melodic hooks, and virtuosic guitar work by Michael Schenker, creating a sound that was both aggressive and timeless. UFO deserves to be remembered as one of the unsung heroes of 70s rock.
You know, I'd swim through the ocean and fly through the sky to get to you.
Stoneground, a Bay Area band that formed in the late 60s, was a unique blend of rock, blues, and soulful melodies that flew under the radar for many music fans. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1971, featured tracks like Rainy Day in June and Don't Waste My Time, that showcased their eclectic mix of styles. Their energetic live shows, combined with a mix of soul, rock, and a touch of psychedelia, earned them a cult following. Despite their impressive musicianship and dedicated fan base, Stoneground never quite broke through to mainstream success. Their music was a bit too raw and experimental for the commercial tastes of the time. The band struggled with lineup changes, which kept them from maintaining the consistent direction needed for lasting fame. Nevertheless, Stoneground's sound still resonates today, full of passion, groove, and a vibe that represents a forgotten yet important chapter of early 70s rock. The Pink Fairies were the wild, untamed rebels of the early 70s rock scene. Known for their raw, chaotic energy, they combined psychedelic rock with hard-edged garage sounds, making them a staple in London's underground music scene. Their debut album, Never Never Land, was a perfect example of their high-octane style, blending rebellious anthems like Do It, with eccentric, almost anarchic jams. Despite their cult status and influential sound, the Pink Fairies never quite cracked the mainstream. Their raw, unpolished music was a tough sell for radio and record labels, and the band's unpredictable nature led to lineup changes that affected their momentum. The Pink Fairies were pioneers in the underground rock scene, combining grit with attitude. They laid the groundwork for future punk and hard rock bands, and their unapologetic spirit continues to inspire. Spooky Tooth was a unique blend of progressive rock, hard rock, and blues, making them one of the most fascinating and often forgotten bands of the early 70s. Their powerful, distinctive sound was best showcased on their 1969 album Spooky 2, which featured standout tracks like Waiting for the Wind and Better by You, Better Than Me.
Better by you, better than me.
The band's layered harmonies, gritty guitar riffs, and haunting melodies made them stand out in a crowded scene. Despite critical acclaim and a dedicated following, Spooky Tooth never fully broke into mainstream success. Their constantly shifting lineup, combined with the band's refusal to conform to typical rock trends, led to a lack of cohesion that kept them from gaining traction with a broader audience. Spooky Tooth was ahead of their time, with a sound that bridged the gap between hard rock and progressive rock. They influenced countless bands that followed, and their music still holds up today as a hidden gem of the 70s rock era. Trapeze was a powerhouse of a band that's often overlooked in the annals of rock history. Formed in the late 60s, their music spanned hard rock, progressive rock, and even elements of funk, all delivered with a raw energy that set them apart. Their 1972 album You Are the Music, We're Just the Band showcased tracks like Coast to Coast and Way Back to the Bone, which perfectly captured their energetic, riff-heavy sound and unique blend of genres. Despite their undeniable talent and an ever-changing lineup that included future rock legends like Glenn Hughes, who later joined Deep Purple, Trapeze never achieved the mainstream recognition they deserved. Their sound was sometimes too eclectic for the commercial mainstream, and frequent lineup changes made it hard for them to maintain consistent momentum. But why should they be remembered? Trapeze was a hidden gem in the 70s rock scene, influencing bands that came later, and their music still packs a punch today, full of emotion, power, and raw, unfiltered energy. The Pretty Things were one of the UK's most underrated rock bands of the 60s and 70s, blending proto-punk, blues, and psychedelia into a sound that was ahead of its time. Their 1968 album SF Sorrow is often cited as one of the first rock operas, influencing bands like The Who and David Bowie. Tracks like Bracelets of Fingers and Barren Saturday displayed their experimental spirit and storytelling prowess. Despite their groundbreaking sound and contributions to the genre, the Pretty Things were overshadowed by more commercially successful acts of the era. Their raw, rebellious energy was a little too much for mainstream audiences, and lineup changes didn't help their cause. But what they lacked in commercial success, they more than made up for in influence, paving the way for future rock bands with their daring approach to music. The Pretty Things are a true gem that deserves more recognition in rock history. Hawkwind were the pioneers of space rock, combining psychedelic soundscapes, pulsing rhythms, and sci-fi themes to create a genre-defining sound. Their most iconic track, Silver Machine, became a surprise hit in 1972, while albums like In Search of Space in 1971 and Warrior on the Edge of Time in 1975 cemented their reputation as innovators. With Lemmy Kilmister, later of Motorhead, on bass during their peak, the band's music bridged the gap between psychedelia and heavy metal. Despite their influence, Hawkwind were often overshadowed by more mainstream acts, and their experimental nature didn't always sit well with the broader audience. Lineup changes and a lack of consistent radio-friendly hits contributed to their semi-obscurity. What makes Hawkwind awesome is their uncompromising creativity. They push the boundaries of rock, blending mind-bending visuals with trippy, hypnotic music that inspired countless artists in progressive rock and heavy metal. Hawkwind weren't just a band, they were an intergalactic experience. That's a wrap on these underrated 70s bands. If you enjoyed discovering these hidden gems, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more music nostalgia. And for more forgotten legends, make sure to check out our video on 70s bands who deserved more recognition.